everyone, I'm Todd Shepherd filling in for John Caldera. You are watching Devil's Advocate on CPT 12. Coming up on the second half of the show, I know you want to stick around for this, we'll be talking to Brian Moss. He's the investigative reporter at CBS Channel 4, and we're going to be talking really exclusively on DPD. How is morale in the department, things like that. There have been a lot of shakeups in DPD, so stick around for the second half of the show. Brian Moss from Channel 4. But for right now, we're going to talk about judicial transparency. Did you know, I mean, Colorado's got I'd say it's a fairly robust open records law compared to other states, but there's this strange loophole that leaves the judicial branch out, loosely speaking. Let's bring in our two guests. First of all, Jeff Roberts, you are the executive director of the Colorado Freedom of Information Coalition. Second time on Devil's Advocate. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
And to my left, Arthur Kane. We'll call him Art. He's the bureau chief for Colorado Watchdog. Good to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. Jeff, let's start with you. How did we get here? I mean, we've got an open records law that applies to cities, counties, school districts, sheriffs, police departments, but for some reason, not the judicial branch. Am I overstating that? And how did we get to this place?
No, you're not overstating that. The Colorado Open Records Act covers all the political subdivisions in the state, the state, the executive branch of state government, the legislature in state government, other state agencies, and like you mentioned, cities, counties, school districts, that type of thing. But there was a court decision, an appeals court ruling in 2012, and actually another ruling several years prior to that, which exempted the whole judicial branch from the Open Records Act.
Well, Art, give us what are some practical applications? I mean, is there anything at all you can get from the judicial branch, like something that would be as mundane as like an electric bill?
You can, but the problem is that they can decide what to give you and what not to give you. So, for example, the the commission that disciplines judges refused to give me the budget for their agency. I'd never heard of I've been in this business for 20 years. I'd never heard of any public official saying their budget is off limits. I asked for the calendars for the Chief Justice after we found out that she was teaching CU on company time.
And let me stop you right there because, I mean, for our audience to know, I request calendars. I mean, that's as a routine sort of building block, informationally speaking, of how government's going about their day-to-day business. I ask for the mayor's calendar, Mayor Hancock, Governor Hickenlooper's calendar. I do that pretty routinely. So this is in any other instance, there wouldn't be a challenge at all.
No, I mean, I've gotten those same calendars that you've asked for. Right. And so after we found out that Chief Justice Rice was teaching at CU, getting more money on state time while, during the day, where she's supposed to be working for the judiciary, I asked for calendars to see how much she actually was working. That's a safety issue, they said.
Wow. So now, were you asking for calendar going forward?
Going back.
Going back.
Because I wanted to see what, what her day looked like. Going forward, you can always say it's going to change, right? I wanted to see it going back.
Right. So now, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I was going to say, on a larger scale, the Holmes case. What was spent in the defense of James Holmes to prevent him from getting the death penalty? This was a case where tax dollars were being spent on both sides to both prosecute him and to defend him. And there was an offer from his defense to have life in prison, which is what ended up happening. So it's a question: how much, how many tax dollars were spent on this? When reporters asked that question of the State Public Defender's Office, this was a citation of a reason why you can't have that information. It wasn't the only reason they gave. They also cited some rules of professional conduct that other lawyers disagree with, but they said the fact that the judicial branch is not covered by CORA is a reason you can't have those spending records.
But not only that, what's funny is that when I asked both the public defender and the Alternative Defense Counsel, which is basically does public defender work when public defender has a conflict, they gave me two different reasons. Alternative Defense gave me Dunlop's, the cost of Dunlop's, an overall cost of Dunlop's. Public defenders said, no, this is attorney-client privilege, and these rules don't apply to it. So they can't even agree within their own judicial district.
As to what the reasons for exempting, keeping the records back. Explain for me really quickly, how is it that if you made that request of the 18th Judicial, George Brockler's office in this case, they would I mean, they would be compelled by law to give it. Why is the defender's office considered part of the judicial branch when I mean, essentially they're the public defender's office. The 18th is basically the public prosecutor's office.
Right. The district attorney's office is not part of the judicial branch. It's actually governed by a different statute, the Colorado Criminal Justice Records Act. And they did, in this case, make a lot of their spending records available. They have a different standard that they have to use to decide.
Right.
It's a standard of whether something is in the public interest or not to disclose, and that's the standard that they use to disclose a lot of their spending in that case. But the public defender's office is not governed by a statute like that.
So strangely enough, we're in this position where, and I mean, all three of us are very interested and active in open records and obtaining them and sort of keeping the pathways clear for people to get them. But it's always difficult to get these stories up to the public consciousness and to make the general public care what the heck is going on here. It seems like this is different, like somehow, and I can't explain it, it actually has percolated up. Mm-hmm. How did that happen, and sort of where are we with that now, Jeff?
Well, I think we're trying to make people aware that the rules that the judicial branch is now considering to put in place, how those would differ actually from the Colorado Open Records Act. And I think you can show people that, for instance, if an employee of another state agency is accused of some sort of misconduct, eventually you would be able to see, as a citizen or a journalist, you'd be able to dig into that, find out what happened, what was, whether there was a discipline, the details of that discipline, more detail about what actually happened. Under these proposed rules, you probably wouldn't be able to find that out, only the fact that there was a discipline or not. So when you put it in those terms of, potential official misconduct, I think that's something that people can understand and relate to, and ask the question, why should employees of the judicial branch be treated, as far as the access to records of their official conduct, why should they be treated differently from the records of other public employees?
Right, and to your point, it's not even just a question of getting the conduct of judges. I mean, sometimes we're just talking about maybe it's the judge's clerk, or it could be just, sort of the standard bureaucrat that helps grease the wheels for the day-to-day work of the judicial branch. Art, you attended, actually both of you did, a hearing was it the Supreme Court?
Yeah.
Okay, so they actually held a hearing on this issue. Tell us what happened there. Was it, was it more or less a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing, or?
There was 6 people who testified, 4 of them against the rules, and 2 of them for the rules. Both of the people who testified for them were judicial employees.
Employees, right.
Of course. But what I found the most interesting was afterwards we all approached the spokesman and said, well, are they going to pass them, or are they going to discuss them? Oh, they never discuss in public. They're going to go back behind closed doors, discuss what they think about the public input for the first time in 2 years they've had public input, and basically decide what they want to do. The good thing is that I think the legislature is probably going to act on this, so those discussions may be moot.
Right. Back to the legislature, which Art brings up, we all do sort of perceive that there's going to be some action, and I know that the Freedom of Information Coalition works, weekly with a lot of legislators tracking what they're doing on things that affect First Amendment, not just open records, but First Amendment cases. So where do you think we are legislatively with some sort of fix to this problem, and will it be comprehensive enough?
It's to be determined what the details of that legislation are going to be,
right.
But at least 3 or 4 state representatives, actually it's a bipartisan group, have said that they are going to have a bill that will at least attempt to create, if not actually cover the judicial branch under the Colorado Open Records Act, create CORA-like rules for the judicial branch, something very similar to what's in CORA now.
And really quickly, we may have used the shorthand several times this show. CORA we're using for the Colorado Open Records Act. You hear the term FOIA federally. That's the Federal Freedom of Information Act. So when Jeff says CORA, that's what we're talking about. It's that specific statute that makes open records.
Right. And last year there was a bill that only would have affected the Public Defender's Office and the Office of Alternate Defense Counsel. That bill didn't get anywhere, near any success. It didn't get out of the first committee. It was opposed mostly by Democrats on the committee who were concern that they were picking on the public defender, which helps indigent people.
Right.
And so now they're going to be looking broader at a bigger, the entire judicial branch.
Any chance the judicial shot themselves in the foot by not letting the smaller bill pass last year? And I mean, now they're the target of a probably wider reaching legislation, right?
I don't know if they did. I think one of the things that some of the people on the committee were saying is, let's wait and see what the judicial branch comes up with for itself. And now we have some indication of that.
Okay, right.
And we know that at least some legislators aren't happy with what they've come up with.
Art, I know you and I probably share a similar sort of worldview towards government and the sausage-making process that is legislation. And, you know, it's all too easy for good legislation to get whittled away bit by bit, hearing after hearing, testimony after testimony. Do you think there's enough motive, or not enough motive, but there's enough impetus here to really to pass something that will be wide-ranging enough and have an impact?
I do, because I think, first of all, this bill isn't going to impact the legislature. They're
and
already
that's
under
always,
this.
It's always,
right.
Don't gore my ox, right, yeah.
It's under, they're looking at the other branch saying, why should you be exempt when we're not exempt? And I think that it's a good government bill that doesn't, there's not going to be any lobbying against it, except for maybe by the judicial branch, which already has had its chance to put in something and didn't do a job that the legislators think was proper. In fact, the first person to testify was the state legislator who's running the bill, Polly Lawrence. And so I think there's a really good chance. I think the carved-out bill, didn't make any sense, because why take one agency of the judiciary and not cover all the agencies under Open Records Act? I think this one already has some bipartisan support, and I think it has a pretty good chance to pass.
About 20 seconds each for final thoughts on what's coming up next.
In this particular arena?
Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to see what's going to happen with this bill and what kind of support it gets, and well, actually, we'll see first what the Supreme Court does with this.
How?
And then if they do something that satisfies legislators, maybe they'll pull back their bill or modify it.
Well, I think the most interesting thing is if this bill passes, and then the first time somebody tries to get records under that bill and the judicial branch says no, then they have to go to the judicial branch to sue them, and all the way up to the Supreme Court to make these rules. So it's kind of a circular process, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens the first time the judiciary comes back under court but says, no, we're not going to give you those rules.
Great. Art Kane from watchdog.org, Jeff Roberts from the Colorado Freedom of Information Coalition. Thanks to you both. Stay tuned. We've got Brian Moss from Channel 4 coming up next.